Just as a mother knows instantly if a child has, let's say, an illness or a disease, I think that I knew instantly that something was wrong. You couldn't hold her. You couldn't soothe her. I remember in the early days I couldn't read to her. She would not let me read to her. I couldn't engage with her. If you put a puzzle, I couldn't play with her. Imagine that you decide that you're going to rescue sort of a fox, or a wild animal. And your intent is to feed that animal and maybe provide it for some shelter, but it's just the reality that you can't cuddle a fox or get that close. And so the relationship only goes so far, and there's this sort of invisible barrier. And I couldn't close that up. It took me a very long time before I felt that what was wrong wasn't about me entirely. When I couldn't find my way to her, I had for a while become convinced that I was unworthy, that I couldn't parent, that I had made the mistake of a lifetime. I didn't have what it took to nurture a child. I was in a danger zone, she was in a danger zone, our family was not solidifying, and there was a lot of sadness, which was really heartbreaking, because you don't go 10,000, to the other side of the world twice, to Sibéria, in the winter, both times, and take a baby from an orphanage and think for a minute that it's going to be anything less than something you're going to throw your full self into. When Julia was about 3, I had mentioned a lot of these odd social behaviors to her pediatrician, and he mentioned, for the first time I heard, reactive attachment disorder, and I wasn't ready to hear that. Well, as a journalist, I started to say, wait a minute, I'm going to find some objectivity. I'm going to look at this as starkly as I might do a story. It was what it took to send me to the internet, to send me to the library, to Barnes & Noble, and essentially our home became Operation Save Julia. Like many children who have started their days institutionalized, who've lived in orphanages, 10 babies to a room, 100 babies to an orphanage, in rather stark circumstances with multiple caretakers, is that these children from Russia come to America and they have all sorts of behavioral issues. And they have trouble bonding. And what they eliminate is the possibility for lovely moments. An infant is separated from a parent instantaneously, left, abandoned, and they develop a sense that the world is not safe, that they can't, that there's not that one person, the mother, to trust, that who takes care of them is random, whether or not they get their needs met is arbitrary, and even though they are extremely young and they don't have the powers to reason, they develop almost a cynicism, a sense of a defense mechanism where they have a tough time trusting, and it interrupts their ability to attach to one person, and it sets up a wiring in the child where that child is oppositional and in resistance, and in fact is afraid to be loved. There have been 17 examples of Russian children who've been adopted who have died at the hands of their adoptive parents. I don't think I've ever had violent tendencies toward Julia, but I can understand how if I didn't at least have the support of my husband, if I at least didn't feel as though there was somebody to catch me every night, I might have spiraled much more out of control. I started to work with Julia when she was sort of turning from 4 to 5. But it was about that time, too, that, she was developing verbal skills and the start of more intellectual ability. So we had the tool of dialogue, which we didn't previously have when she was a baby. These children, for example, are hooked, and I mean addicted, to chaos. They're only comfortable when there's chaos. So we both, by uniting and having a united front, we learned how to slash through her chaos, how to undermine it, how to seem indifferent to it. And there's a whole bunch of counterintuitive parenting advice that we gathered and used. And it was like our house became a war room where we were fighting a battle, but we were fighting it together. That's what turned it around. And little by little by little, Julia still has these inclinations in her wiring. But the difference is that before, she was unattached. She was not bonded, and now she is. I can see that she has that she's a budding artist. She is incredibly talented in terms of expressing herself in, well, in visual media, but in particular in cartooning. And there's a whole life that lives inside of Julia's head that is that's been expressed all along, but that's really starting to develop now. And I cling to that happiness. There's one great irony to this whole thing is the early days in Julia's life would have said to me, you have no maternal instinct. And because that was the initial experience. I have no maternal instinct, this isn't working. But ironically, and maybe this was the life lesson, was that it took my very instinct and trusting myself to say, I can figure this out. What I'm hoping is that my story is one of optimism, that even when you feel like you want to give up, you can never give up on a child. You can never give up on that possibility of getting that child to bond with you. And I want that story to be told. I hope that other women who might feel what I was feeling and do it in isolation would be more inclined to share their situation and go in search of help, whatever method they choose. And I think, like I said, this situation is not specific just to internationally adopted children, though I think that if you looked at the pool of population that is parents with international adopted children, that there would be a disproportionate number of those people who have probably struggled with this issue or some version of this.
If I needed you, would you come to me? Would you come to me to ease my pain? If you needed me, I would come to you. I'd swim the sea to ease